There's no getting around it. Your success at a sales meeting is going to rise and fall depending on how well you can speak to your salespeople. You can be the most well-informed person in the world, delivering the most important piece of information they will ever hear, yet you'll still see people examining their knuckles if you're a bad public speaker. There are lots of things that can go wrong when you're giving a sales meeting to a large group of salespeople. However, there are also a lot of things you can do to reclaim your audience. Tell stories. Anecdotes and stories are what get people listening. They're going to need these stories to form a framework for the facts that you've given them. Stories reflect the way people think. Most people don't try to memorize long lists of facts. You need to give people something to connect with emotionally. Make sure the story is told well. Rehearse. Make sure it has a nice twist or reveal. Be sincere when telling the story. Use your arms or body to animate the story. Be sure the story fits the meeting's main topic. Bring the characters alive by giving smaller details. Make sure your salespeople can relate to the story. Starting with a story or an anecdote can be a great way to connect with your class in the beginning. It beats opening with a joke, which will only distract from the content of your speech. What you need to do is get your salespeople to feel things, which will ultimately get them to think. If you've been in car sales, chances are you have plenty of stories to tell. You need to choose a good one that's going to illustrate the points you want to address. From there, you should be able to get your audience engaged with the stuff that isn't as much fun. Give people the basics in an outline. People like to think in terms of big, broad outlines that pave the way for the rest of what you're about to say. From there, you'll be able to get them to remember what you're saying. What you're saying doesn't have to be entertaining. However, phrasing it in a way that is entertaining will make a huge difference. If you're connecting with your salespeople, you'll need to talk about the main things that they'll need to keep in mind during a sale. Make a list of those characteristics, repeat that list, and then fill out that list throughout the meeting. People like feeling as if they can skim a document, and the same principle applies with this sort of rhetoric. People are going to have a problem remembering a shapeless lecture that will put people to sleep before they even start. Tips to consider during and at the end of your sales meeting. Go over the main points of the sales meeting in a summary. It's necessary that you get them involved and thinking during your meeting. Provide some open-ended thoughts to provide some further thoughts for your salespeople. Leave your salespeople with positive memories of your presentation. Finish your meeting with a final thought or emotion. Whether you're giving a meeting or creating a more Socratic teaching workshop that involves interaction with your salespeople, they need to feel as if what you're saying has a lot of direction and momentum. A list of topics is going to do that for people. They'll be eager to keep on listening to hear what happens next. People want to hear about the next part of the story to get a sense of what happens with the plot. The same principle applies here. You may not be telling a story, but at some level, people are always seeking a narrative in what others are saying. Create a narrative for your salespeople. Short sentences and wit. Wordiness is tough enough in written speech. When spoken, it is going to put people to sleep almost immediately. Obviously, you're going to need to share some technical terms with your audience members during times like this. However, you can't just start throwing lots of syllables at them, or you may as well be standing there mumbling. Create better punch by using short sentences to make your point. Use small phrases and even single words like they are sentences. String small groups of sentences together, usually 3 or 4 is plenty. After a long description, use short sentences to summarize what was said. Short sentences grab attention, punctuate a point, and signal completion of a thought. You don't want to have to tell jokes all the time during your meeting, or you're going to end up coming across as unfocused. People like a few jokes, but a witty turn of phrase that is technically serious is a much better way of going about it. You need to be professional, and a witty turn of phrase is going to give people a better reaction than a completely flat speech or one that is distracting in its humor. Addressing nervousness. Lots of time, if you're mumbling, stammering, or using a lot of words or sentences, it's because you're nervous. This is normal, and it's called nervous chatter. Nervousness is a huge problem when it comes to public speaking of all kinds. Before a sales meeting, you're going to have to find some way of addressing this problem, or you're going to run into a lot of problems down the line. This is very important. You probably had to go through some sort of regimen to address nervousness to get to this point in your career. Whatever worked there might work here. Everyone is different. Do what works for you. Ways to control your nerves before and during your meetings. Tip number 1, stay hydrated. Tip number 2, exercise just before to stay calm. Tip number 3, try pictures, visualization, or laughing just before you speak. Tip number 4, smile and keep breathing. Tip number 5, embrace the energy. Tip number 6, be prepared. However, the important thing to remember is that you're going to be addressing people on the same team. Salespeople are in a somewhat adversarial relationship with each other, and there is no getting around that entirely. If you want to connect with them, you must use very high-level social skills, and it gets even more high-level when it comes to closing them on your ideas and dealership vision. If you can do this, it's going to be easier to connect with the people who are working with you or for you. Just try to remind yourself of that, and you'll probably have an easier time when it comes to connecting with them and impressing them with your powers of speech.